The fourth dusk of the Martian spring smeared the trench line in burnt umber haze, and every man and woman on the Valles Marineris front knew what that meant. Another night of the same. For 18 months, the Coalition and the Heliox Dominion had clawed at each other over 200 kilometers of freeze-dried canyon, neither side able to push the other more than 100 meters before the counter-barrage arrived. We'd traded rail spikes, drones, and bodies until the ledgers blurred. Mars Tekken's gravity was lighter than Earth's, but the war felt heavier every week. I was Captain Ria Ferreira, forward observer, 301st Infantry. My job was to stare across the no-man's land through a cracked visor, plot fire missions, and radio numbers that flung strangers apart. It was work a machine could have done better, but a machine couldn't smell ozone or hear men praying or shiver when the night winds whispered through gun ports. Command claimed that kept us tactically grounded. What kept me grounded was Sergeant Nor Atieno, my spotter. She brewed coffee thick enough to stand a multi-tool in and reminded me every dawn that the line held because we were on it. We'd stop naming the days after months. A shift began, a shift ended, and sometimes a lull let us recall we were still human. 2 weeks earlier, a courier drone brought rumors harder to believe than any propaganda pamphlet. Experimental Armor Battalion 47, codename Cheshire, had reached operational readiness. 9 phase-shift main battle tanks, each the size of an orbital shuttle, wearing alloy that rippled like oil on water. Supposedly they could step through space-time the way an infantryman hopped a ditch. We laughed. One rumor swore the tanks could go intangible. Another claimed they could vanish in one place and bloom fully solid in another. Trench tales, we thought, like the old stories of super soldiers whose blood healed bullet holes. But the message traffic at Division grew jittery, and General Danziger started canceling routine bombardments, saving shells for an event. You could taste the anticipation in the recycled air. On day 557, the Heliox guns went strangely quiet after sunset. That alone would have tightened spines. But then their broadcast drones began bleating surrender offers, bait we knew better than to bite. Something was in motion. At 2010, Division ordered all forward observers to observe phase-line Canis for anomalous signatures. No elaboration. Nor and I checked our battery packs, tuned the thermal scopes, and stared into the cooling dusk until our eyes watered. At 23:07 we caught the first ripple. It was not light, though our sensors logged photons. It was not sound, though pressure in the ear shifted. Imagine the horizon wrinkling, as if the planet had inhaled. A ribbon of stars bent, snapped back, and in the gap, 9 shapes coalesced. Blacker than the canyon's shadow, the ground beneath them hissed, where fresh iron met ancient dust. "Cheshire Actual, all pounces accounted for," a voice barked over the open coalition band. Calm, clipped, as if announcing mess rotation. Commencing hunt. 2 kilometers behind the Dominion trenches, the materialized tanks deployed like pieces on a hollow board. Each hull floated the faint corona of phase exhaust, spent gravitons sparkling off flat armor facets. They hadn't tunneled under, hadn't flown above. They had simply chosen not to be here and then decided they were. Rumor, it turned out, had undersold them. My visor fed back every coalition frequency at once. Cheering infantry, stunned artillery crews, a chaplain whispering, "Mother of Mercy." Nor inhaled through her teeth and grinned like a child seeing fireworks. The Heliox positions reacted slower than I would have credited. Their entire doctrine was built on hammering forward, not watching their rear. But discipline asserted itself. Searchlights wheeled, turret alarms howled. The Dominion kept a regiment of Aegis Walker guns and 4 shielded rail batteries for counter-battery work. By 2310 they were pivoting, men and machines scrambling to face the impossible detachment that had appeared like ghosts. V. Lieutenant Jowlin K., commander of Cheshire 3 Wayfarer, felt the thud of real gravity return as her tank fully resolved. The shift always stole something, a moment of memory, a slice of recognition. Training taught you to ignore the vertigo, to trust the tactile ping that said every module had planted in the same local space-time. She exhaled once, slapped the bulkhead. Crew, we're green. Target lattice uplink loaded. Gunner, paint rail battery gamma. Driver, advance 40 meters, combat glide. Phase glide was not true intangibility. It was momentum borrowed from elsewhere. A microstate slip that let 80 tons of metal surf a fractional second ahead of detonation. Theoretically safe, in the simulators at least. Tonight, it had to be. Her platoon's orders were simple. Sever the Dominion's arteries, ammunition dumps, power relays, command bunkers. Before their front-line trenches understood, they'd been gutted. The entire war, 18 months of attrition, boiled down to 20 silent minutes in the enemy's backyard. VI from IOP, the battle unfolded in layers of light. Scorching coil cannon swaths from the Cheshires, spiderweb lines of Dominion laser defenses, the white spears of rail spikes as the Heliox batteries tried to swivel. The tanks didn't dodge so much as refuse the normal geometry of fire. A spike would tear through the space where a tank had been, but the beast was already straddling 2 instants further on, hull strobing. You could follow the path only by the after-images of killing. The Dominion infantry panicked first. Helm cameras we hijacked showed men turning inward towards supposed safety, only to find nightmare constructs rolling between prefab housing and fuel silos. The tank's coaxial disruptors, low-yield, anti-personnel energy nets lit trenches like welding art. Distance did not cushion the screams. At 23:15, Division gave every coalition battery permission to fire over open sights. We rained shard and kinetic flechette into friendship lines we'd stalked for a year. It felt treacherous, like shooting someone asleep, and necessary, like cauterizing a wound. Inside Wayfarer, Lieutenant K ticked off objectives. Ammo dump, vaporized. Field hospital, spared. Those stray Dominion rockets cratered the tents anyway. Rail battery, gamma, still stubbornly firing. Gunner, full charge, no shift. They would stand and slug it out like any conventional tank now. A Dominion Aegis Walker cleared the red dust in 3-meter strides, twin Gauss repeaters chattering. Slugs hammered Wayfarer's bow shield, peeled plasfoam plating. Driver choke cursed, punched reverse thrust. Too late. A slug bored through the comms blister. Static filled the cabin. Not a perfect ghost, after all, Kay thought. War never let anything stay perfect. She authorized a bleed, deliberately sliding the tank a quarter phase for 2 seconds, enough to spoil enemy targeting solutions. During the shimmer, she fired the main gun herself. The molten penetrator roared, hit the walker's knee, and the machine folded as if kneeling to an unseen monarch. Rail battery gamma followed, cracking open like an egg full of lightning. The platoon net chirped. Cheshire 6 down, hard materialization into subsurface basalt. One of theirs had reappeared partly inside a rock shelf, an old nightmare from the earliest tests. 9 tanks berthed, 8 still hunting. Price of miracles. 8. By 23:20, Heliox command packets showed total signal collapse. We intercepted frantic orders to retreat east, then conflicting orders to hold, then simply static. Our infantry, starved for any advance, swarmed across the old killing field behind a rolling screen of drones. The Cheshires dragged Dominion barricades aside as a human might kick sticks, opening corridors for the footsloggers. Noor redirected mortars to new choke points. I called counterfire on pockets of resistance. The front was suddenly 20 kilometers wide, and we struggled to even name it. The crushing awe reminded me of childhood documentaries about the first time cavalry met muskets. History pivoted, and you could hear the hinge groan. At 23:27, I got permission to displace forward. Noor and I clambered out of the trench, boots sinking in dust that had drunk centuries of sun, now wet with coolant and blood that winked silver under the moons. We jogged in leaps, following the scorch paths. Dead and wounded Dominion soldiers littered the ruin. But so did coalition bodies, those caught by stray artillery when the Dominion guns fired blind. War honors no sides. I toggled my visor to medbeacon mode, marking anyone who still twitched. Combat drones would triage later. Tonight, Salvation wore iterative probability armor, not a medic's harness. Ex-Wayfarer limped now, port treads half-severed, coolant venting. Lieutenant K ordered a static hold by a toppled comms tower that still blinked blue arcs. Infantry poured past, cheering, slapping the dented hull. She offered them the wave of a weary goddess. In the tank's shadow, a Dominion officer knelt, hands laced behind his head. When Kay nodded to the prisoner, he stared at her machine as though it were an angel come to weigh his heart. "Sir," Joe said over internal, "Bridge request casualty tally. Fleet needs victory metrics for the news feed." "Tell Fleet the enemy broke," Kay answered. "That's the metric." In truth, she wanted to tell them the cost. The crew of Cheshire 6 fused inside basalt, the gunner on Cheshire 2 hemorrhaging from phase lapse. Miracles run a tab. 11. By 003, Coalition drones declared operational control of grid 1492 through 14129, terrain that had defined the stalemate since the first week. Voice channels dissolved into celebrations. Civilians in borough cities 3,000 kilometers away, howling freedom songs. Analysts predicting the Dominion's unconditional withdrawal within 80 hours. I watched a Dominion banner burn in low gravity, embers spiraling like lazy fireflies, and felt nothing I could name. Nor elbowed me. "We should be happy. It's over." I gestured at the shattered field. "Things don't end. They just move." She uncapped her flask, passed it over. I tasted bitter coffee, colder than the night. General Danziger arrived in an assault shuttle at 1:30, his staff forming a parade amid the debris. He toured the Cheshires, cameras hovering around him, rehearsing lines about the dawn of 72nd century maneuver warfare. When he asked Lieutenant Key to stand beside him for a holotaken speech, she complied, face set in polite detachment. "Today," Danziger intoned, "we stepped through the impossible." Key, voice low enough the microphones barely caught it, replied, "We stepped through people, sir. Let's remember that part." The general paused only a heartbeat before continuing the broadcast. Later propaganda edits removed her words. Just before local sunrise, I wandered to where Cheshire 6 had died. Only the turret protruded. The rest of the tank was hermetically welded into bedrock, a perfect mechanical headstone. Engineers would eventually carve it out for study. For now, a coil of frozen white vapor marked the last breath of 5 crew we never met, nor joined me, silence agreeing with silence. In the distance, new trenches were already being surveyed to defend our newfound ground. The shape of the front had changed. Its existence had not. "It felt like magic," she said. "Magic always has a trick. Someone pays. Would you still call fire for them again?" I answered honestly. "Tomorrow and tomorrow, until something better arrives." She didn't argue. Beauty was the air we breathed. XOXO, we established a forward command post in the burnt shell of the Dominion's logistics hub. The Cheshires were parked in a crescent, engineers crawling over them, plugging data needles into scorched armor. I overheard technicians debate how far they could safely phase. 10 clicks? 100? Could they leap an ocean? A planet? I thought of the old Earth myth's gods who punished hubris by granting a wish too literally. In a quiet corner, Lieutenant Key shared rations with her surviving crews. They laughed at some private joke, the sound brittle, exhausted. I wondered if they knew what had changed more, the map or themselves. X-Key. That evening I dictated my combat report. The file was classified, priority black, which meant the censors would slice it until only the adjectives remained. I wrote anyway, describing the first ripple, the uncanny silence, the way rail batteries sparked like struck flint before folding. I wrote about the officer who knelt because all that was left to do before an impossible engine was surrender. And I added a line no algorithm could erase without stripping meaning entirely. We won. By arriving outside the story the enemy expected, I hoped a strategist somewhere would understand that the sentence carried an unspoken twin. Someday our enemy might do the same to us. Night fell, but the mind kept replaying. I remembered the old routine of trench watches, the stale humor, the counting of shells. It felt prehistoric now. A door had opened. We stepped through. We had not yet looked behind it. Just before I shut down the comms board, a private channel pinged. Lieutenant K's call sign. I answered. "Observer Ferreira," she said. "I requested your log. Good lines." "Will they publish them?" I asked. "Probably cut them to poetry." A tired chuckle. "I wanted to hear the raw version. Needed someone else's eyes to confirm it happened." "It happened," I said. "Congratulations, Lieutenant." A pause, long enough to matter. "Don't congratulate me. Ask me tomorrow how much of us made the jump. Good night, Captain." She closed the channel. XVII, next dawn the wind carried copper dust over our new positions. Relief columns marched forward, spades on shoulders, ready to carve security berms. From hilltop to hilltop the Cheshires crouched, engines idling like captive thunder. Their hulls still shimmered faintly, as if the universe had not finished deciding whether they belonged here. I watched the sun climb, painting everything gold red. Nora raised her visor, inhaled cold morning, and smiled. I tried to emulate her and felt the smile crack at the edges, but hold. Somewhere in Heliox territory, panicked officers were drawing fresh defensive rings. Resistance would continue, maybe for months, maybe years. Yet the equilibrium had ruptured. The trenches we'd called home were already just depressions in dust, a museum exhibit without a curator. I thought about the tank, stuck in basalt, its crew entombed to win this advance. I thought about Lieutenant Key's grim calm, about Dominion soldiers crushed before they understood the rules had changed, and I wondered if that was the nature of every great leap, to trade familiar horror for a stranger one. The phase shift drives could carry a battalion across any barrier, but no shift could move humanity outside itself. Still, the order came down the line, prepare coordinates for the next push. And because I was Captain Ria Ferreira, forward observer, I etched numbers into photons, numbers into airway, numbers into blood. The Cheshires would hunt again. The world would ripple, and we would follow, grounded not by comfort, but by witness. The war went on, yet none of us stood in the same place anymore. No matter how firmly our boots touched the red Martian soil,